Well, good morning. I am happy to introduce our presenter today. Sister Anne Gray is 67 years professed as a daughter of wisdom. She began her teaching career in Montreal, Canada, as a teacher of English to French Canadian students. This early exposure to language learning led to her pursuing a degree in French language and literature. Returning to the United States, she taught French at the high school level and served as chair of the language department. Her co-curricular activities spanned from moderating speech and debate club to producing the biannual school play. She claims that one of the joys of teaching at this level was to see how education in the arts helped young persons to discover and achieve their true potential. In the last segment of life as a teacher, she applied to St. John's University for a teaching fellowship, which was granted, and which enabled her to pursue a doctorate in American literature at the university. There, she taught classes in writing. Whether she taught tutorial writing or creative writing, she discovered a new purpose: to encourage the students to be free of the anxiety of writing and to discover the writer within themselves. Sister Anne served as provincial leader of the U.S. province for 2 terms and enjoyed reading the signs of the times from a leadership perspective. Retired now, she serves as our justice coordinator for the U.S. province. And so we are happy to welcome Sister Anne and receive her insights on this topic.
Thank you, Pat, and everyone for all your effort, and good morning.
Thanks, everybody.
This morning, our reflection from Walking in Praise is titled, "It's an Inside Job. To make outward change, we must first look inward." You know, when I chose this reflection a number of weeks ago, I thought how appropriate. Pope Francis speaks of conversion of heart to allow, as he puts it, an immense love for our shared planet to begin to grow in us. I realized this morning, as I moved from head to heart, and as I tried to write some thoughts for our conversation this morning, just how we allow this immense love for our shared planet to grow in us is both invitation and challenge, especially when the need for outward change is equally as great as the need for inward. World leaders are again gathering next November for COP28 in Dubai. They gather with a certain sluggishness toward ending the era of fossil fuels, slowly responding to the reduction of greenhouse gases, and still debating the degree of financial aid to the vulnerable who have suffered the most from the effects of climate change. So how in the world, with all this, do we first look inward? Something caught my eye as Francis in number 216 of Laudato Si begins his discussion of ecological conversion. He makes a very simple observation about the precious contributions that the rich heritage of Christian spiritualities make to the renewal of humanity. And you know what springs immediately to mind is our own wisdom tradition, which does offer us that interior impulse and motivates us to a more passionate concern for the protection of our world, something that doctrine or ideas or concepts simply cannot do. So I think specifically of a familiar quote from the Book of Wisdom 7. Wisdom renews all things. In every generation, she passes into holy souls and makes them friends of God and prophets. So, even in our crazy, polarized, addicted generation, we are the beloved of wisdom. Wisdom who knows the number of the stars and who joyfully plays in the natural world. It is wisdom who invites us into a friendship, into a relationship that invites our love and our energy to flow toward this world, its persons, its living creatures, its social structures. And because we are passionately bonded in friendship, our heart loves what wisdom loves. And so a second role is given us, that of prophet, moving us to speak truth to power about injustice, as prophet moved to comfort those who suffer. Living as best we can our double role of friend and prophet, might this be a step toward first looking inward to make outward change? In all cases, allowing holy wisdom to shape us into a wisdom community of loving God, of loving each other, and struggling for justice in this world, it sure seems like a great place to start. However, Francis wants us to remember that although he appreciates religious conversion, he's talking about ecological conversion. He actually quotes Benedict XVI at one point, who in a homily in 2005 said this: "The external deserts in the world are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast." I'd like to repeat that quote. The external deserts in the world are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast. Yes, Francis uses this quote for its ability to startle us and to underline the ecological crisis that calls for an equally profound interior conversion. For Francis, he states there are two kinds of people: those who scoff about the expression of concern for the environment, and those who are passive, choosing in the end not to change their habits. So he is calling for a third kind of people, living out their vocation as protectors of God's handiwork. And in addressing this call for a profound interior conversion, Francis begins to talk about the importance of attitudes. It makes me think of a student I had many years ago who loved to wear a t-shirt that said, "I've got attitude." And boy, she sure did. So I guess, attitudes are important. Francis talks about gratitude as the first attitude, giving thanks to God for creation. And this is the one I like, for being wonderfully made. And another attitude he calls awareness, to assess creation as God does in all its splendor and suffering. Francis speaks often of a Trinitarian reality, to live in communion with God, with others, with all creatures. A third attitude is understanding, to see how my life choices impact creatures, the poor, and the vulnerable. And the fourth and final one of his is reconciliation, grace to reconcile relations with God, creation, humanity, and to stand in solidarity. Quite honestly, I think Francis is calling upon his own Ignatian spirituality at this point, as he places an echo-examen at the center of all of his attitudes. I would like to recall also the words of the poet Wendell Berry, who has devoted many essays to the environment. Wendell Berry says, quote, "I do not doubt that it is only on the condition of humility and reverence before the world that our species will be able to remain in it." Humility and reverence before the world, so that our species will be able to remain in it. So to Francis's 4 attitudes, I'd like to add humility and reverence as well. No matter, we know that God is doing something new in us, and we have only to respond in fidelity and love. And so I would like to end this morning with a prayer by Ilia DeLeo. I'm sure you are familiar with her writings, but she is a great definer of Teilhardian spirituality. Her writings reflect the cosmological force of love, and that God and the world are one. Or, as we would say, wisdom is the earth's foundation. So sit back, breathe a little, and listen to Ilia's prayer. I believe in one God, one human family, one planetary community, one body, one love, uniting all in beauty, for God's infinite love is infinite, fruitful, and beautiful. I believe I am entangled with all earth life and all living creatures. I believe this future is the relational unity of all things in God. I believe this earth has a future entangled with God. I believe the heart of God is love. Amen. And so let us take the next few minutes to ponder our entanglement as we journey from inward change to outward.